Victoria Harland voice split through the crowd, mocking the janitor. "Play this piano," she declared loudly, "and I'll marry you. Hell, I'll make you rich." "I'm here to do my job, ma'am," the janitor said quietly. "Job?" Victoria repeated, amused. "Your job is what? Mop floors and dream small?" A pause, sharpened for effect. "But we both know you can't. Some worlds simply aren't built for everyone." Laughter rippled in the crowd. They say genius rises. Truth is, sometimes it's crushed into silence, mopping floors in buildings named after lesser minds. Elias Cole didn't resent the world for that. Resentment was noisy. He preferred precision. Most people in that glass kingdom never looked at him long enough to see more than a uniform, all except the one who believed she owned altitude. Victoria Harland, billionaire, culture darling, philanthropy trophy, a woman who mistook her luck for destiny and her arrogance for excellence. She spotted him near the grand piano, cloth in hand, dignity in posture, and something primal flared in her eyes. Entitlement testing curiosity power, sniffing for weakness, ego, searching for a stage. "Play that piano," she said, voice smooth as a threat disguised as charm. "And if you play it flawlessly," her smile sharpened, boardroom watching, cruelty dressed as humor, "I'll marry you right here." Laughter. Corporate amusement, the kind only power finds ethical. A billionaire offering a crown she believed was holy, in exchange for performance. Elias didn't flinch. He simply lifted his gaze, steady and surgical, the way truth looks at delusion before it breaks it apart. Some men beg for opportunity. Some men wait for precision. And some men, when arrogance challenges them, do not bow. They calculate. Harland Global Innovations glimmered against the city, a mirrored monument to money and myth-making. 42 floors of curated light and engineered silence. A tower built not for shelter, but for dominance. Inside, the air hummed with ambition so rehearsed it had forgotten its origin. The executive floor, level luxe as insiders called it, was a cathedral of polished power. Marble like frozen moonlight, art installations that whispered generational wealth, orchids imported weekly because decay had no place here, only curated life. And through it moved a man most people didn't register long enough to ignore properly. Elias Cole. Maintenance uniform, quiet spine, eyes that observed like they were gathering data for a future where truth would finally breathe. He polished the lobby marble in slow circles, not from obligation. No, obligation is sloppy, but from an internal discipline that arrogance could neither see nor comprehend. People assumed obedience when they saw quiet hands. But quiet isn't always surrender. Often, it's strategy. The elevator chimed, a polished, confident sound, the kind made for the ears of people who believed they owned a cent. Executives spilled out with the entitled calm of those who think gravity negotiates with them. Soft leather shoes, muted luxury, voices trained to sound like authority without ever questioning its source. Elias didn't raise his head. There is power in choosing where attention lands. But he sensed her presence before the room noticed her shoes. A shift in air, the subtle tightening of posture among the grooming elite. A silence that didn't ask for space, it demanded it. Victoria Harland entered. 35, but sculpted by wealth and self-belief into something ageless and sharp. Alpha grace in tailored ivory, diamond watch like an heirloom of ambition. The world loved her story. Self-made billionaire, philanthropist, magazine covers that painted her as modern royalty. The world never paused long enough to ask who built the ladder she claimed she climbed alone. Confidence glimmered around her like frost. Beautiful, cold and capable of killing slower than knives, yet far more effectively. "Good morning," she announced to the room, tone like polished steel pretending to be silk. Executives echoed their chorus of "Good morning, Ms. Harland," each word dipped in reverence and self-interest. Victoria's heels clicked once, twice, a rhythmic assertion that floors were built for her arrival. And then she stopped, gaze landing not on the boardroom, but on Elias. A pause. Nothing more dangerous than a pause from someone used to absolute compliance. Elias continued wiping marble, still, calm. Neither flattered nor intimidated, and silence, when it refuses to bend, often offends power more than rebellion. Her voice floated out, feathery and fatal. "You admire the piano, don't you?" Heads turned. Curiosity sharpened into spectatorship. Rich people adore unexpected entertainment. Elias didn't rush to answer. Time can be a defense if you refuse to let the powerful own it. "Yes," he said simply. No tremor. Respect without subservience. Rare currency in corporate empires. A faint smile traced Victoria's lips. Elegant, dismissive, predatory. "Do you play?" she asked lightly, as though the question were harmless and not a trap laid in crystal confidence. "I have," Elias replied. Truth, delivered like a blade wrapped in velvet. Some executives smirked. Polite derision, the kind trained in private schools and inherited board seats. "A janitor who plays piano," someone murmured, just loud enough. Victoria lifted a manicured hand, silencing them like a queen entertaining a curiosity. "Interesting," she whispered, a word that often precedes cruelty in corporate dialect. She moved toward the grand piano, glossy black, untouched, placed as a symbol of sophistication none here possessed enough soul to use. "Come," she said to him. Not a request, not even a command, a performance cue. He stood, cloth still in hand, not hesitant, simply unwilling to dance until the music mattered. Victoria touched the piano lid gently, as though crowning herself with culture. "Play it," she said. Soft voice, hard edge. "And if you play it flawlessly." She shifted, offering him the kind of smile that ruins reputations and convinces the room cruelty is sophistication. "I'll marry you right here." Laughter cracked open, the expensive, manicured kind that treats dignity as disposable entertainment. "Imagine that," she continued, tone sweet as poison. "A billionaire marrying her janitor. All because he fancied himself talented." Elias stood in the circle of their amusement, not small, not broken, just deliberate. A man who knew storms better than they knew ceilings. He looked at the piano, then at her, measured, precise. His silence drew oxygen from the room. Finally he spoke, low, steady, factual. "Marriage isn't an upgrade." Pause. "And music isn't performance." Ripples through the room, discomfort, curiosity, threatened ego. Victoria's expression didn't crack. Women at the top learn early that emotion is a luxury men weaponize against them. She had abandoned softness to survive, then convinced herself the sacrifice made her superior, not wounded. "Oh?" she replied softly. "And what is music to you?" "A truth," Elias said. "A truth people recognize even when they pretend not to." Her jaw shifted, a fractional movement, threat, intrigue, a crack in her confident universe. "Then prove your truth," she whispered, "or return to cleaning and keep your poetry to yourself." Corporate cruelty, framed as benevolent challenge. A few executives chuckled. Fragile people often laugh with power to feel close to safety. Elias placed the polishing cloth down gently, like setting intention, but he didn't move to the piano. Not yet. Sometimes the most powerful act is refusing to perform on someone else's stage. Not all stages honor the music they demand, he said evenly. Silence, the heavy kind. Victoria tilted her head, studying him. A predator curious whether the prey had teeth. He picked up his cleaning tools and turned away, continuing his work with unwavering rhythm. Not defeated, not afraid, simply not owned. And the executives felt something they weren't prepared for, the unsettling quiet of dignity that doesn't need permission. Victoria blinked once, confusion disguised as disdain. Power hates mysteries it can't classify. "Carry on, then," she said coldly, turning toward the boardroom. "As you were." She walked away, but she did not forget. No monarch ever forgives someone who doesn't bow. And the air changed, subtly, sharply. To anyone watching, he was simply completing a shift. But silence has layers, some submissive, some strategic. And someone was watching. A junior analyst, young, sharp-boned, and new enough to still mistake justice for career fuel, glanced at Elias before sliding into the boardroom, expression unreadable, a flicker of curiosity or guilt. Hard to tell. Guilt and awakening share the same first face. Inside the boardroom, voices rose, muffled through glass, but tone travels. Victoria's voice, composed steel wrapped in silk, cut through first. "Not talent that worries me. It's complacency. The moment we think we've earned our place, we lose it." The executives murmured approval, corporate worship disguised as agreement. Nobody ever risked descent this high up the food chain, not unless they wanted to be escorted out with a security badge instead of a legacy. Another voice, older, careful, adhered to protocol. "Yes, Ms. Harland, we operate as though meritocracy is real." A ripple of polite laughter. Victoria didn't laugh. She rarely did unless she controlled the context. "Merit isn't ideology," she replied. "It's a filter." Behind the frosted glass, silhouettes nodded. Loyal disciples or frightened ones, impossible to distinguish. Out in the hall, Elias wiped dust from a sculpture he could never afford to own, yet understood deeply. Bronze formed into a human figure bending under invisible weight. A corporate art metaphor so on the nose it almost screamed. Carrying the system that refuses to see you. A floor supervisor walked by, eyes skimming Elias, assessing, not seeing. Hierarchy breeds blindness. "Bathroom floors next," she murmured, not pausing. Instruction delivered like the world expected instant obedience. Elias didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the only reply dignity allows. He moved toward the restroom corridor, slow, unshaken steps, posture intact. Every motion calm enough to unsettle those who mistake humility for dependency. People assume janitors are quiet because they have nothing to say. Wrong assumption. Quiet is not emptiness. Quiet is a vault. While vacuum lines formed across a luxury carpet, Elias reviewed equations in his head, fractals, harmonic resonance structures, algorithmic symmetry, neural mapping patterns, entropy disguised as custodial duty, a mind calibrating itself in plain sight. You don't announce intelligence in rooms not built for it. You apply it when timing demands. Victoria leaned forward, hands clasped, every gesture engineered for command. "We need to show the market we scale with integrity," she declared. Tone clipped, elegant, merciless. Integrity. That word sat oddly in her mouth, like a foreign phrase learned for optics. A CFO in gray leaned in. "We could spotlight your scholarship foundation again." Her smile tightened. "Find a story with more friction. People don't respond to perfection. They respond to triumph over adversity." Triumph over adversity. A phrase she believed belonged to her alone. curated into interviews, stitched into TED stages, rinsed through media until it gleamed with inspirational varnish. Adversity. Interesting word for someone whose father sat on 2 Senate advisory boards. But the world rarely audits narratives that flatter it. Someone cleared their throat. Adversity like rising from nothing? Victoria flicked him a glance, thin and precise. Nothing is relative. Silence followed, obedient. In the hall, Elias emptied trash cans, hands steady, mind tracking every syllable through the glass. Ego, he thought quietly, is loudest when it believes itself noble. A subtle ache settled in his chest. Not bitterness, just recognition. A man who knew injustice not as concept but lifestyle doesn't waste energy on hatred. The meeting adjourned with the ritualistic rustle of designer portfolios and practiced ambition. Executives poured out again. Same hush of wealth, now layered with strategy. A VP brushed past Elias and paused, as if seeing a human shape instead of background for the first time. "You know," she said softly, awkwardly, "you didn't have to react earlier. Ms. Harland was joking." He didn't look up. He didn't oscillate to make her comfortable. "Power rarely jokes," he replied. Her mouth opened, protest forming, defense loading. Then something stopped her. Maybe conscience, maybe discomfort. She walked away without finishing the thought. Discomfort is good. Discomfort wakes sleeping ethics. Elias finished tying a trash bag with slow precision. Not stalling, just moving at the speed of someone who refuses to be rushed toward smallerness. Victoria exited last, always last. Those who believe they lead often choose dramatic exits as proof. She saw him again, still working, still dignified. Her expression held curiosity now, not admiration, not respect. Curiosity like a scientist who noticed a lab mouse isn't following the procedural script. "You didn't play?" she observed. Elias turned just enough to meet her eyes. Nothing submissive, just truth seeing, truth lose its balance. "You didn't ask to listen," he replied quietly. A beat, dangerous, delicate. Her jaw flexed, microsecond of threat, then composure. Smooth, perfect, brittle. "Ambition without initiative is fantasy, Mr. Cole," she said softly. "Power without humility is failure waiting for scale," he answered. Harlan Global was a temple to productivity worship. Elias wheeled his supply cart past the strategic futures wing, glass offices, frosted panels, conversations about impact metrics and scalability ethics, words stretched like silk over profit agendas. Inside one of those offices sat Naomi Holt, Senior Innovation Officer, sharp mind, sharper restraint. She noticed him through the glass, not because janitors often stood out, but because earlier, something had shifted the air in this building. Some gestures, quiet refusal, unshakable dignity, echo. They irritate silence. They cling to conscience like dust in sunlight. She tapped the edge of her tablet, distracted. Not by him, by the faint question he'd planted without speaking. What does intelligence look like when no one expects it to live here? Meanwhile, on the lobby level, Elias repaired a malfunctioning vacuum. Cheap wiring, cheap choices from procurement who never had to use the equipment they approved. He unscrewed the casing with a borrowed maintenance tool, movements apple pie simple but edge of genius exact. Inside, his mind wasn't on wires. It was solving a harmonic mapping structure, a theoretical puzzle he'd been building for years. Neural resonance patterns, algorithmic music theory, a language between sound and cognition. He didn't separate labor from thought. Some people clean as escape. He cleaned as meditation. Precision isn't job-based. It's identity-based. A passing manager spotted him working, frowned. "You need a tech for that," she said, tone dipped in corporate condescension. "It's fixed already," Elias replied gently, reassembling the casing. The machine hummed smooth as truth before denial. Her brows lifted, surprise dressed as irritation. People rarely enjoy being proven unnecessary, especially by someone the system trained them not to see. She walked off, pretending she hadn't been corrected. Small power bruises easiest. Meanwhile, Victoria glass office, view like a throne. Silence manicured. Victoria reviewed reports with the composure of someone convinced the universe was a merit chart she ranked first on. But threads in her mind had shifted. Disruption unsettles those who mistake control for identity. She tapped her pen, a soft, rhythmic sound. "He didn't play," she murmured to herself. Translation: he didn't kneel. Some leaders admire strength in the lowly, others feel threatened by it, because it reminds them they didn't rise by virtue alone. To her reflection in the window, she whispered, "Everyone climbs, or they stay where they belong." But her own voice sounded thin. A knock. Her assistant entered with a rehearsed smile built for high stakes and fragile egos. "The press team confirmed tonight's gala," she reported. "Good," Victoria replied, then paused. "You see the janitor this morning?" The assistant hesitated. Not fear, just confusion at the irrelevance. "Yes, Miss Harland." Victoria's gaze turned translucent, the look of someone performing logic while nursing emotion she refused to name. "I don't like unpredictability," she said quietly. The assistant nodded as though wisdom had been imparted. What she really heard was insecurity wearing heels. "Make sure the facility staff are rotated off the executive floor this week," Victoria added, voice cooled to marble. "Not punishment, not openly, just removal." That's how power cleans up emotional spills, quietly, without witnesses, as if the offense was the dignity, not the disrespect. His break was short, 15 minutes of institutional concession. He sat in a supply closet, not from orders, but because solitude protects truth from dilution. Phone in hand, cracked screen, brilliant mind behind it. He opened the research notification he'd ignored earlier. "Congratulations. Round 2. Selection, Neural Complexity, International Prize Submission, Harmonic Cognition Model, unpublished." A soft breath escaped him. Not excitement, something purer, confirmation. He didn't indulge triumph. Pride is for those who need applause to validate effort. He preferred momentum. Scrolling further, final evaluation panel will include Victoria Harland, Harland Global Innovations. The air shifted inside that tiny closet. Fate has a humor that borders on cynical. He smiled, not vengeful, not gloating, just aware. Systems aren't random. They circle back. They test integrity without asking permission. And now the woman who mocked his dignity would be forced, at some future moment, to hear the intelligence she dismissed. Music and mathematics share DNA. He felt both vibrating under his ribs. His break ended. He stood, shoulders straight. No rush. You don't hurry destiny when it finally starts moving. Screens lit with elegant animation. Harlan Foundation Gala. Tonight, celebrating innovation, equity, and the future of human capability. The irony was surgical. Elias paused under a glowing screen, reading it the way some men read prophecy. Gala, piano, public stage, audience trained to applaud the powerful, and a woman convinced she controlled the narrative. He didn't plan revenge. Revenge requires resentment. He dealt in something cleaner. Victoria Harlan didn't return to her glass throne by accident. Arrogance needs an audience. She had engineered hers perfectly. Mid-morning, board packed, coffee steaming in biodegradable cups designed to look humble and cost triple the market rate. Victoria walked in like capital incarnate, tailored confidence, titanium posture, a smile sharpened to cut air and ego simultaneously. And there he was again, Elias, placing a pitcher of water near the corner of the room with steady, unadorned grace. Invisible labor in a world that worships visible power. Her gaze found him the way a hawk scans ground-born creatures, with amusement, predation, and a touch of boredom. Still considering my offer, Elias? Tone light, mockery dressed as humor. Executives chuckled, anxious loyalty disguised as mirth. He paused only long enough to signal he heard her, then returned to his quiet task. Measured, controlled. Not defiance, discipline. Power mistook it anyway. You know, she continued, ambition is admirable, but delusion. She lifted her glass like she was toasting his supposed inferiority. Dangerous in the wrong hands. Silence. Not the respectful kind, the one forced by hierarchy. Elias placed the last glass down, straightened slowly. His eyes rose, not upward, but through her. A man who studied equations had no fear of shallow variables. I don't confuse delusion for vision, Ms. Harland, he said, tone neutral as steel. And I don't confuse opportunity with spectacle. A few executives shifted. Truth sometimes ruffles clothing before it ruffles systems. Victoria smiled, tight, icy, the kind used when someone beneath you dares speak in complete sentences. Lovely phrasing, she replied, then leaned forward as if awarding a scholarship. Try not to become too poetic. It won't help in your role. Roles, titles, the architecture of modern caste systems. He nodded once, not in submission, acknowledgement of data collected. Her insult logged, her ego measured, her fragility confirmed. And still, no anger, only a quiet mental note. When a storm comes, wind is not the threat, structure is. She dismissed him with a flick of attention, already turning to a presentation about innovation culture. Irony tends to enjoy a front-row seat. Elias walked out without hurry. Calm doesn't announce itself. It inhabits the room and leaves with dignity trailing like a quiet prophecy. In the lobby, the piano sat untouched, a black monolith of potential, a symbol of prestige more than art. He passed it every day, never looked at it long. Quiet genius doesn't need witness yet. But today, he paused. Not to play, not to entertain, not to prove, to remember. Memories of hands scarred by cleaning chemicals, but once trained by symphony discipline. Of scholarships kissed by talent but smothered by circumstance. Of doors that opened for weaker minds with stronger privilege. He touched one key. Silent. Just the feel of possibility resting beneath restraint. Greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, calculating. A security guard glanced over. Elias moved on. Patience is a strategy ego never learns. Harlan Global ran on confidence algorithms and manufactured prestige. Shareholder worship, vision statements engineered like fragrance ads, inspirational without specificity. And in that polished ecosystem, Victoria Harland walked like a woman allergic to doubt. But power has a smell when it begins to rot. Subtle, metallic, like fear pretending to be efficiency. That week, murmurs followed her. Not rebellion, corporate murmurs never are, just tiny hesitations, barely perceptible delays in laughter, glances that lasted a millisecond too long. Human instincts sense disruption before minds catch up, and disruption wore janitor shoes and carried a silent symphony in his chest. Victoria announced the Harlan Genius Initiative, A PR campaign masked as philanthropy, masked as ego. "We will identify hidden potential in unexpected places," she declared, tone dripping benevolence for press cameras. "Inclusivity meets excellence. Opportunity finds talent." Everyone clapped. Compliance is a job requirement at that altitude. Then her eyes drifted, intentionally, theatrically, to Elias standing near the back wall, holding a cleaning cart like a prop in someone else's script. "Even here," she added, voice warm like a blade heated before cutting, "we never know what brilliance may hide in humble corners." A polite room, a cruel subtext, her smile, CEO certified righteousness. Elias didn't move. Humility reads as weakness to people raised inside applause cages. Victoria continued, "Imagine someone from maintenance rising into innovation. What a story that would be." The room nodded. A few executives looked at Elias like he was a lottery ticket with a tear in it. He simply met her gaze once. No hostility, no gratitude, just awareness, the kind that makes powerful people suddenly feel mortal. Later, hallway whispers fluttered. "Why did she single him out again? You think there's something about him?" "She likes theatrics. It's performative altruism." Performative, one of the most expensive illusions in corporate culture. Elias didn't rush to prove anything. A lesser soul might. He cleaned. He observed. Evenings he stayed after hours, not to climb, but to understand the architecture of arrogance. Who laughed first at her jokes, who watched instead, which executive eyes flickered with doubt, which ones tracked him too long, sensing something but not naming it, and every night he passed the grand piano, untouched since her dare. He didn't sit. He didn't play. Restraint isn't weakness, it's timing, and timing ruins kings more effectively than rage. Security nodded at him. Most of them thought he was quiet because he was simple. A few sensed depth and got uncomfortable. That's the thing about genius hidden in plain sight. It doesn't announce. It disturbs. Victoria watched him from glass offices and polished boardrooms. Not fascination, irritation. Power hates enigmas it can't classify. She expected deference, or desperation, or at least awe. Instead, she got neutrality, measured calm, a man who responded to arrogance the way mathematicians respond to noise. By filtering it out, it gnawed at her. Confidence, when built on fragility, needs validation like oxygen. His silence suffocated her. And quietly, without pomp or declaration, the corporate weather shifted. A COO paused before repeating one of her ideas. An intern asked a question that challenged a talking point. A senior VP hesitated before laughing at her jab. None of it rebellion, just hairline fractures. Empire's first crack in the tone of the room. The room held itself still. Executives leaned forward like spectators at a slow-motion execution. Phones discreetly lifted behind coffee cups. No one wants to miss a downfall, especially one corporate culture frames as uplift. Victoria stood beside him, posture gleaming with superiority. A queen who brought a pawn onto the board solely to prove it could never become anything else. Elias walked to the piano, not rushed, not dramatic, measured, each step like punctuation in a sentence arrogance never learned to read. He sat, straight spine, calm breath, hands resting in his lap as though the keys belonged to him and he simply hadn't decided they were worthy yet. The room expected trembling. They found stillness instead. He placed his hands on the keys. A hush fell, the kind born not from respect, but hunger for failure. Then he began. Not loudly, not flamboyantly, precision, delicate, clean, each note placed like a scalpel, dissecting the room's assumptions. The melody wasn't famous, it was original, structured, mathematical elegance wrapped in emotion, something no one could dismiss as luck. And slowly, almost painfully, every face changed. Confusion, recognition, unease. His playing wasn't good. It was undeniable. Talent so refined it felt inconvenient. The sound carved silence the way truth carves ego, without apology. Victoria's smile froze, the human equivalent of glass learning what pressure really means. Whispers rose like smoke behind hands. Actually, this is professional level. Wait, what is this piece? Someone tried to keep clapping quietly in rhythm, but it faltered. Because awe kills performative enthusiasm. He kept playing, and every note said what words never could. You should have looked deeper. You should have seen me. You didn't. And now everyone sees that. Halfway through, he shifted style, Baroque structure, romantic vulnerability, modern dissonance, layers, history in motion, discipline disguised as grace. Executives looked at each other as if silently asking, "Have we been working in the same building as this person?" One VP whispered, "He doesn't belong in maintenance." Another replied, "No, we do." Hierarchy flinched. And Victoria? She stood beside the piano like royalty forced to applaud a revolution. Her voice, when she spoke, cracked at the edges. Well, this is—" She didn't finish. Because he chose that exact second to execute a passage so brilliant, so surgically precise, that her sentence died in embarrassment. Timing. He understood it better than she ever had. A final chord. Soft. Resolving. Devastating. Silence. Real silence. Not polite, not ceremonial. Recalibrating silence, then applause, uneven at first, then rising. Not admiration, surrender. Even cameras, programmed to hunt spectacle, froze as if unsure who the story belonged to now. Victoria swallowed. Her throat betrayed her before her face did. He stood slowly. Nod, not bow. The difference tasted like dignity. The room held itself still. Executives leaned forward like spectators at a slow-motion execution. Phones discreetly lifted behind coffee cups. No one wants to miss a downfall, especially one corporate culture frames as uplift. Victoria stood beside him, posture gleaming with superiority. A queen who brought a pawn onto the board solely to prove it could never become anything else. Elias walked to the piano, not rushed, not dramatic, measured, each step like punctuation in a sentence arrogance never learned to read. He sat, straight spine, calm breath, hands resting in his lap as though the keys belonged to him and he simply hadn't decided they were worthy yet. The room expected trembling. They found stillness instead. He placed his hands on the keys. A hush fell, the kind born not from respect, but hunger for failure. Then he began. Not loudly, not flamboyantly, precision, delicate, clean, each note placed like a scalpel, dissecting the room's assumptions. The melody wasn't famous, it was original, structured, mathematical elegance wrapped in emotion, something no one could dismiss as luck. And slowly, almost painfully, every face changed. Confusion, recognition, unease. His playing wasn't good. It was undeniable. Talent so refined it felt inconvenient. The sound carved silence the way truth carves ego, without apology. Victoria's smile froze, the human equivalent of glass learning what pressure really means. Whispers rose like smoke behind hands. Actually, this is professional level. Wait, what is this piece? Someone tried to keep clapping quietly in rhythm, but it faltered. Because awe kills performative enthusiasm. He kept playing, and every note said what words never could. You should have looked deeper. You should have seen me. You didn't. And now everyone sees that. Halfway through, he shifted style, Baroque structure, romantic vulnerability, modern dissonance, layers, history in motion, discipline disguised as grace. Executives looked at each other as if silently asking, "Have we been working in the same building as this person?" One VP whispered, "He doesn't belong in maintenance." Another replied, "No, we do." Hierarchy flinched. And Victoria? She stood beside the piano like royalty forced to applaud a revolution. Her voice, when she spoke, cracked at the edges. Well, this is—" She didn't finish, because he chose that exact second to execute a passage so brilliant, so surgically precise, that her sentence died in embarrassment. Timing. He understood it better than she ever had. A final chord, soft, resolving, devastating. Silence, real silence. Not polite, not ceremonial. Recalibrating silence, then applause, uneven at first, then rising. Not admiration, surrender. Even cameras, programmed to hunt spectacle, froze as if unsure who the story belonged to now. Victoria swallowed. Her throat betrayed her before her face did. He stood slowly, nod, not bow. The difference tasted like dignity. HR stood like they were witnessing a lawsuit being born. PR already rewriting narratives in their heads. Executives plotting how to ally themselves with genius before denial turned into headlines. Victoria cleared her throat. Truly unexpected. A sentence trembling under the weight of its own inadequacy. He looked at her, not aggressive, not triumphant, simply honest. "You said if I played flawlessly, you'd marry me." A ripple of nervous laughter. She forced a smile that shook. "That was a joke." He nodded. "I know. Beat. I just wanted you to hear it land." Those words hit harder than music, because now the room wasn't laughing at him. It was watching her. Curiosity turning predatory, observers hunting weakness in the powerful, the way they always do once the spell breaks. Arrogance had overplayed its hand. And silence, his greatest instrument, finished the performance. He didn't stay for applause, just turned, uniform crisp, posture certain, and walked away. And the sound his shoes made on the polished floor wasn't footsteps. It was consequence. Victoria's empire didn't collapse that second. Falls rarely happen instantly. They start with a shift. And every soul in that room felt the floor tilt. A janitor walked in. A truth walked out. And power, real power, quietly changed hands without a contract, a title, or a ceremony. Just brilliance meeting arrogance and leaving it exposed. Everyone suddenly remembered Elias's name. Selective genius recognition. Corporate evolution at work. Victoria Harland, though, sat in her office staring at the city like it had betrayed her. A woman accustomed to controlling narrative now found herself orbiting someone else's. Her assistant knocked softly. "Press is asking about the performance. They want comment." Victoria's voice, once steel, now paper-thin. "Tell them it was an internal development initiative." The assistant hesitated. "They're also asking if he was part of the talent program before or after you announced it." A long silence. Mirror-clear realization settled. She built a stage for him. He built a truth she couldn't outshine. The CFO found Elias in a hallway days later, folding clean microfiber towels like origami. Corporate humility always arrives late. "Elias," the CFO began, clearing his throat, "we'd like to formally recognize your talent. Leadership sees potential pathways. Perhaps innovation analyst, mentorship track." Elias kept folding towels. Even movements were answers. "I appreciate it," he said finally. "But I don't need reclassification to validate ability." The CFO blinked. Hierarchy wasn't prepared for someone uninterested in climbing its ladder. "Consider it," he replied stiffly. "We'd hate to lose you to another firm." Elias smiled slightly, not sentimental, just aware. "You didn't have me in the first place." No aggression, just truth. The kind executives can't expense away. Victoria summoned him. Her office, a shrine to dominance, felt smaller now, as though the air refused to carry her ego as high as before. He entered without shrinking. Quiet doesn't bow once it's been heard. She spoke first, voice taut. "I want to acknowledge your performance. It was impressive." He met her gaze. No gratitude, no triumph. "You don't have to compliment me." We both know the applause wasn't for skill, it was for realization. "What realization?" she asked, though she already knew. "That value doesn't need validation from titles." Her jaw tightened. She tried one last move. The power play she trusted more than oxygen. "I can secure your future here. Elevated position, real salary, recognition." He studied her like a mathematician studies flawed logic. "My future doesn't need your permission." There it was. Checkmate delivered softly, without triumph or cruelty. Precision, not punch. She leaned back. The empire in her posture cracked just a little. "You embarrassed me." "You embarrassed yourself," he said gently. "I simply removed the echo." No heat, just reflection. Sometimes the most devastating truth is spoken without raised voice. He didn't wait for promotion paperwork. Didn't crave a press story. Didn't demand apology. He simply walked out one Friday afternoon, handing in a badge worn like an invisibility cloak. Security paused, not to stop him, but from respect. "You leaving for somewhere big?" one asked. He shrugged lightly. "Just somewhere I'm seen." Outside, air tasted real. For the first time, the world wasn't above him. It was beside him. Not a rise, a return. Weeks later, a music conservatory quietly announced a new program. Scholarship Initiative. Genius hidden in plain sight, anonymous donor. Anonymous founder. But the architecture of humility has fingerprints the proud rarely recognize. Students walked past a plaque that read, "Brilliance doesn't ask for permission. It waits. And then it chooses. Not his name, not his story, just the truth. Freed. Small community music hall. Dim lights. Piano worn, not polished." Elias sat alone at the keys, not proving anything now, just breathing sound into space. He played softer than at Harlan Global. Not triumph. Peace. No audience, no stage built by ego, no eyes assigning value. Just notes, honest and unperformed. Then silence. If this story moved you, don't scroll past. In a world where talent is often hidden behind uniforms and quiet rooms, moments like this remind us, greatness doesn't ask permission, it simply reveals itself. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories of dignity, justice, and unexpected genius. Like and share to remind someone that potential doesn't come with a dress code. Comment. Genius has no rank if you believe talent deserves respect, no matter where it stands. Let's amplify voices that rise beyond assumptions. More stories that challenge arrogance and celebrate brilliance are coming.